George is the president and CEO of BRS Management, and they help radio stations, e-commerce company that helps radio stations brand their sites on the internet. So please welcome George Bundy. So,
thank you.
You're welcome. Branding, you help radio stations brand their presence on the internet. How do you go about that?
Well, we have a number of different ways. Back in the mid-90s, I thought the opportunity that the internet brought an opportunity for radio stations to extend their brand online. Radio tends to be a very branding opportunity. You know, you probably don't know your radio station's colors, but you know its brand, its music, its format, its feel. And this basically extends above and beyond that. We also are the exclusive register of .fm domain names. We secured the rights to that back almost 10 years ago. So we help radio stations with their website address. Locally, you may know WTUL.fm, 2 lanes,
right.
URL, is basically what we do. We work with commercial radio stations, like the #1 hip-hop station in LA, Power 106.fm, and a number of growing internet stations that basically aren't terrestrial radio stations, that have no physical means to what FM means, but it provides them with an opportunity to brand their radio station as a radio station online.
So now how do you go about getting FM domain names?
Well, I mean, they are available on our website as well as a number of partners that we have worldwide. We have like 120 some partners worldwide that you can purchase the domain name with.
But how did you get it?
How did we get it? Well, that's a long and complicated story, but in the mid-90s, there weren't really all that much on the internet side except for .com, .org, .edu. We looked for an opportunity to help radio stations go above and beyond that. Radio stations go out of their way to get a special 800 number with 1-800 Power 106, you know, and things of that nature. Wouldn't it be great if they had a good, unique URL that matched something like that? Basically, extension of their brand. So each country in the world has a country code in addition to .com. Here in the US, it's .us. In the UK, it's .uk. Well, there's a small Pacific island out near Guam called the Federated States of Micronesia. And their 2-letter country code is FM. Who knew when they dumped those out that actually was going to work out to their advantage? And they saw an opportunity, like empty real estate. They weren't utilizing that. We saw an opportunity to help them build infrastructure. They take the revenue sources for that. They have Wi-Fi on the island, where just a number of years ago, only about 60% of the residents had telephone service. So it's really helped them increase the technology-wise, almost, you know, better than, you know, some main, you know, right now, most of the major cities, including New Orleans, we were talking about that, and San Francisco, talking about free Wi-Fi. 2 years ago, I was in the island at the hotel in Micronesia. It was free Wi-Fi all over the island. So you see, you know, the technology's helped them improve quite a bit. At the same time, we feel that it's really helped the radio stations, and our retention rate is tremendous because once they build off that pretty much they keep it for life.
Well, so that's, I guess, the beginning of a trend, isn't it? I mean, to brand websites with a business extension.
Well, yeah, I mean, up till now, you know, everything has pretty much been relying on, you know, the .com. Of course, that's still predominant in every part of the business aspect. But over time, the industries that regulate the domain name have seen fit to actually work in that direction. They've released new extensions called .travel, .jobs, .mobi. And all these particular extensions are very focused on one industry and very focused on the industry. You know, we saw that more than almost 10 years ago, where that would be an opportunity to extend that and go above and beyond that, because the fact of the matter is when we thought about that, that'd be great for AM and FM licensed radio stations. Now we see a whole different set of clients coming our way, those that have no physical transmitter whatsoever, that just stream off the internet, that have an audience base that is compelling and just as high as some of these local radio stations.
So we could start extensions were created, about whom and how that worked. Could you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back near 20 years, because it was like in the mid-'80s. A couple of gentlemen at the University of Southern California decided that the internet was inevitably going to be commercialized, because up to that point in time it was pretty much just used internally from university to university. And they did it all based on IP numbers, complicated sets of 123.456.789 and the like, that it had to be easier to remember. Same purpose coming with why telephone numbers are 7 digits. That's the retention rate of learning that. So they decided to come up with different ones, and to make it consistent above and beyond the .com, that means commercial, or the .net, that meant network, or edu for education institutions, that in doing that and dealing with the country codes, come up with some consistencies. Basically, it came down to the 2-letter country codes will receive the 2-letter domain extensions. Down the line now further, some people say, well, some really received an opportunity and others didn't. I mean, just happens to be a small island country, also in the South Pacific Ocean, has the extension Tuvalu.tv. And that's also been very popular with television, video streaming, and the like. We have .am as well as .fm. There's .la. There's a number of different extensions that, the opportunity is that they can utilize them within the country, but at the same time, work to the advantage of those that want to extend their brand, because inevitably the internet's becoming more of an expansion just above and beyond a commercial entity. I mean, it's an extension of your brand, and as such, you'd like to have your name on the internet to be something that's extended. So
one more point on this, you made a deal with Micronesia to sell their domain name?
Right.
And AM is?
Armenia.
And so you made a deal with them as well?
And Armenia as well, yeah. And they've been on since, both of them have been pretty much under our management since 97, 98.
I see. And you sell this name to individuals and also to wholesalers, correct?
Right. I mean, we have, a number of radio stations we work with directly, and some that we don't even know about. There's many a times they'll end up going to a particular station to find out it's an FM extension that I didn't even know existed.
How many stations would you say are using this FM domain?
Overall, there's about 50,000. Yeah. And it's a worldwide audience, because we have resale partners in Germany, in Korea, and Japan that sell in that marketplace. Because radio still, even though it's on the internet basis, for a fact your local radio station is very much community-based. So even though it may stream across the internet, it has a URL, it has a website, it still very much focuses on local community it serves. If it's an FM and AM station license, basically, somebody can hear it in Germany, and that's fine if you're sitting in New Orleans or like. But for the most part, it's still got to serve its community, both because of its FCC license, if it's an FCC broadcast station, but also to the success of the radio station. If they don't, reach the local audience, local advertisers don't sponsor anything on that station.
So your company is basically dealing with internet radio stations and helping them brand their presence on the internet.
Right.
And you do it with the domain names, but how else do you do it?
Well, we help them with the streaming opportunities too. We have a directory of close to 10,000 radio stations listed. We provide them with promotional opportunities to get their station out to an audience that may be above and beyond the extension, because in addition to having the local audience there, there's plenty of opportunities to extend that station's reach.
How do you help them do this?
And, well, it works with providing the station with either a listing, a stream, or an opportunity, focusing on that aspect of it. We provide them with the keys and the ability to build an audience where they may not have seen necessary or fit. With the directory, we have an opportunity to bring them an audience that they didn't necessarily know existed. Whether it's in their own local community, because they, maybe not know the station was streaming. One of our clients in San Francisco actually was a business AM radio station. It was doing well, and business in the early 2000s, before the .com bust, was great. I mean, business was the internet in the San Francisco Bay Area, in Silicon Valley. So they were doing well, but the problem is that an AM signal doesn't really penetrate buildings well. And when you're a business radio station, your key market audience is those listening during the day. They want to know the market results. They want to know what's happening in the market. They want to know what's going on in business. They're sitting in their desk. They're sitting in their office. But the AM signal just can't penetrate that. We provided them with an opportunity to help them stream their signal on the internet. And they got a whole different set of audiences. Those that couldn't listen, impossible to listen. But it's still within their listening base area. Couldn't listen because they were in buildings in San Francisco. But at the same time, they took that audience that was listening to them at work, who couldn't hear their signal, and started recycling those audiences when they got in their car. They could hear the AM signal again to take it with them, take it at home. So the internet for the radio stations brought an opportunity, and the local aspect of it is to get the listener where they didn't have an opportunity before.
Well, that works for everybody concerned. I mean, if the user can get to the radio station in both ways, do you help your clients in their branding operations maximize their search results on the search engine?
Well, we have certain companies that do that. I mean, we provide them with some tools and opportunity, but yeah, I mean, there's a whole different aspect of helping them understand what makes their station succeed both on the air and online. So the idea being that, yeah, you can get, a URL, but that in and of itself isn't your lesson to succeed with. So, there's plenty of ways to do that just based on our experience. The fact is that, we have 10 years of experience in doing that aspect of it, that it's a compelling thing of what to do and what not to do. It's amazingly simple. Perfect example is we find radio stations that don't actually have various keywords in their, main website. Simple things like that. I mean, how is the search engine going to determine what your site's about if you don't tell it what it is? They're not going to be able to determine that just from a website address. You have to actually either have that content up there or provide various keywords in there that tell the search engine how to take advantage of that.
But not all of your customers are terrestrial radio stations.
No, they're not. Like I said, we're getting a pretty high growth percentage of stations that are just internet based. It's creating a whole radio station just specifically on the internet. And that's actually probably the largest growth area. I mean, for the most part, the FCC isn't dealing out new licenses right and left. So there pretty much is, every radio station that's going to be on, except for a few examples, they're already there. But on the internet side, basically anyone with mic, server, few songs here and there, and some CDs, they can, basically start their own radio station. So in a way, that's kind of frightening for the terrestrial broadcasters to think about it, makes them shake in their boots. Some of the old suit and tie guys in broadcasting, that could be their biggest competitors.
It's just like the music business. I mean, the music companies don't no longer control distribution of content. So the same for radio.
Absolutely. The same thing is going on in that regard. I mean, it really is becoming an important aspect. In the broadcasting industry, and I see it from both sides, we go to broadcasters conference and we go to internet conference. On the broadcaster side, the guys tend to think their biggest competitor is satellite radio. We've all heard of Sirius, we've all heard of XM. They're digital, there's 100 channels, it's in your car, you pay a subscription for it. Now it's in the car, the guys are, the AM and FM radio stations you ain't listening to anymore. So as a result, there's your competitor. But I think the thing is, their biggest competitor is internet stations. Because whereas XM and satellite only have 100 channels to compete with, there's basically close to 5,000 and a growing list of internet radio stations. And yeah, so for the most part, you can listen to them at home. You can listen to them at work. Okay, well, Ford just announced, and it was written in the USA Today paper on Friday, that Ford is going to be putting PCs in the dashboard of cars beginning with the 07 model. And specifically, the USA Today report mentioned internet radio in that article about the fact that the PC is going to be in the dashboard, just like AM/FM radio is now. So inevitably, you've got a choice of 6,000 radio stations, not 50 in your local market, 100 on satellite radio, or 5,000 off the internet.
So sell your stock at Clear Channel?
Sell your sock and satellite radio. Well, I mean, a whole different aspect of the business is going. I mean, you know, right now, maybe you shouldn't necessarily sell your stock because the rumor is there's an opportunity that Clear Channel may not exist in a couple of years. I mean, there is that, you know, who is going to be buying? I mean, you know, if you looked around in the industry, the fact of the matter is that there's question as to which direction Clear Channel is going to be headed. There may not be, as we know it today, Clear Channel in a couple of years from now. And it's interesting because you thought that, you know, they were the dominant monopoly in the traditional broadcast medium. That may not be enough, folks. That just may not be enough to succeed in the entertainment business. Because although they dominate with close to 1,200 radio stations out of 13,000 licensed in the U.S., they may not be able to dominate when your choice in the radio, in the car, at home, and at work is close to 6,000 or 7,000 stations.
So what's going to be the effect of this federal law that's mandating the switch over from analog to digital, from low def to high def and all that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, you see this all the time, and it's a lot of marketing. But right now, AM and FM radio stations are broadcasting in analog. Okay, we're not ones and numbers here. This is you know, FM was created, in fact, just last year. The inventor was in 1935, so FM is 70 years old. AM, complicated actually, maybe close to 100 years old. Its technology, really, for the most part, hasn't changed. 20 years ago, so they tried to make AM stereo, it just never worked. But pretty much so, we've been dealing with the same technology. Wireless audio is what you want to call it, but AM and FM has been around for 70 or 100 years. Television is going through the same thing, where now the signals are being sent on the digital side. Higher quality, you know, better use of bandwidth and all that other stuff. So the fact of the matter is, and television is dealing with this now, they've got a mandate pretty much 09 on the television side. You've probably seen a lot of these television stations doing that. On the FM side, it's still unclear as to actually when. They're just this week announcing that Circuit City is going to start selling HD radios. Radio stations in a lot of the markets have been broadcasting on the digital side, but pretty much there's no product out there for the average consumer to listen to it. It will provide near CD quality on the FM and current FM quality on the AM, with the static not being there and the like being there. So, you know, it provides traditional broadcasters what they feel is more of a competitive issue against the satellite radios, because they're broadcasting in digital quality, and inevitably, you know, internet radio, because, you know, that's all going to be digital. And that's how it's sent across the IP, is in a digital form.
Everything's going to change in that world then, right?
It is. I mean, for the first time, and like I said, close to 70 or 100 years, the traditional broadcast medium is going through a number of changes. You know, it's always gone through changes. Many people said that in the 50s, when television came along, it was going to be the death of radio, as we know it. It didn't really die, but you see it changed quite a bit, because many of those programs in the 40s and 50s were what you may see on television today. The Today Show, The Tonight Show, game shows, soap operas, and that stuff were broadcast on radio. They all moved over to television. Radio had to find its niche, and that's where it actually began playing music. The rock and roll era, 55. Well, that's about the time radio stations started playing music. AM disc jockeys and the like. So radio did shift from being an entertainment medium that played hour-long programs like you see on television today to, you know, 3 or 4 minute songs with disc jockeys. And basically, that's something that happened 50 years ago. It dramatically changed the industry. How it will change now, still difficult to determine. I think the thing is that they find they'll go. I mean, it may not be a music-based entity. I mean, as you see internet radio stations and stuff like, you know, MySpace, where music can be, you know, listened to and stuff like that, that the relevance to music on the radio station may not be as significant as it once was.
So any business can have a radio station?
Any business. I mean, the interesting thing is that we have clients that actually have no previous broadcast knowledge. And that could be as simple as a real estate radio station on the internet, where basically they're on their internet radio station selling houses in the market. In Fargo, North Dakota, They have a radio station. I mean, yeah, it's not disc jockeys, it's not music, but they're putting audio content on there. One of our clients is webmasterradio.fm. They basically have nearly 24 hours of talk shows that are focused on what webmasters who build websites want to know. How to get listed on Google, how to take advantage of certain opportunities. And that's something that you wouldn't find on a traditional radio station. Maybe a half hour, maybe something. This fills that whole gap.
So who has to get paid? If somebody in this audience wants to start a net radio station, other than the mic, other than the server, other than the music, who do they pay?
Well, I mean, like traditional radio stations or performance rights, there's still the ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC. I mean, you have to pay the royalty rights for the performing rights for that. Then there's also the sound exchange rights, the copyright issue of that. That's been a tough haul for the past 10 years after a number of copyright issues have passed Congress both in 95 and 98 that actually brought a regulation to this. Traditional radio stations pay BMI, ASCAP, and CSAC rights. They pay performance rights for the songwriters. They don't pay any rights for the artists.
Right.
The record labels receive no money for any record played, any CD played on a traditional radio station. And that will also be true when traditional AM/FM radio stations turn to digital. But in both 95 and 98, Congress passed a Digital Millennium Copyright Act that made it that satellite radio stations and internet radio stations have to pay copyright labels, record labels, as well as the songwriters.
How are those fees determined? Is it listenership?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a number of different ways. If the statutory license, which basically means you don't have to go to every label to actually get the rights and then come up with a deal with that, is that you pay on basic per song, per listener basis.
Micro cents.
Yeah, exactly. So you're paying almost like you buy every song off of iTunes every time somebody listens to it. The drawback to that, the barrier to entry for that, is that it makes it challenging because a lot of internet radio stations are still not profitable. I mean, this still becomes a business, and as such, advertisers have to pay for the business aspect of keeping the radio station up. Normally, like CSAC, ASCAP, and BMI songwriter rights are based on a percentage of revenue. Okay, so if I make X amount of dollars, percentage of that goes to the royalty rights, and that's fine because if you only make a couple $100 off your station, well then or a couple of $1,000, you only pay a couple $100, you're a percentage of that. This really becomes, as you build your audience, if you don't create a revenue source on a business model, then it can get out of hand. They're right now in negotiations for the next set of years to do that for royalty rights, and we'll see whether it'll become a percentage of revenue or maintain this way. There is a thing, we can go back and talk about royalty rights and how that came about per song, per listener basis. Because when the copyright law was passed, it was determined by Congress that the rates would be determined by a willing buyer, willing seller. What you want to buy it at, what I want to sell it at. If we come to an agreement, it's great. And that works in a market where there's multiple players and there's multiple people coming in. Because then, the market sets the price and the price is competitive. But at the time, they were determining that there weren't that many radio stations streaming off the internet that actually had a willing seller and a willing buyer. The willing seller was the Recording Industry Association of America. And at the time the royalty rates were set, the willing buyer was a company called AudioNet or Broadcast.com. And that deal was reached by Mr. Mark Cuban based on the fact he reached the deal specifically that way, not a percentage of revenue, so that he raised the bar to the point where the entry level was too high to get in the business. And the problem we lead in today. That because it's not a percentage of revenue, which means small players are on an equal level playing field, it's a per song, per listener basis. So if your revenue don't increase X amount of times your listener base, basically it puts you out of business.
So, Mr. Cuban sold his company to, was it Yahoo?
Yeah,
For how much?
$5.7 billion.
That's a hefty sum.
Yes.
That must have been pre.
It was 6 months before the dot-com bust. Yes, so the timing is everything in regards to that.
You may have had something to do
And it
with
may have something to do with it. But at the time, see, the difficult, challenging things were the Congress passed this law for copyright issue based on a willing seller, willing buyer. For the congressional leaders, it was a great thing because they figured let the market determine what the price would be. The difficult challenge for them to understand was the internet being so new, internet radio that is, that there really wasn't a market of a lot of willing sellers and willing buyers. It came down to just one deal. And that deal wasn't necessarily made to benefit the industry. It was made to benefit the individuals. And it was made specifically to benefit the individuals based on raising the bar to the point where they limited the competition. It's sort of a standard monopoly tactic.
Yeah, that's
And as such, we're still dealing with that today, and becoming a challenge. I think over time, in the next negotiations that are going on now to set the rates actually for this year, because we passed the current royalty rates for record labels now is already surpassed. They're negotiating for what's going on for 06 to 10, for 10. And I think the thing is that because there's a more market share on both sides of the issue, more radio stations, so there's more voices on that side, that you will probably see a better deal. Maybe not the best deal, but maybe a little bit better deal this time, and hopefully after 2010, a better deal, because you have more fair level playing field.
Well, who created Sound Exchange, and how did they put themselves as the collectors for royalties?
Well, the recording industry of America originally began with Sound Exchange. They were given the rights for Congress to create this municipality to collect royalty rates on sound recordings after the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, both in '95 and then the revision in '98, as a resource to collect these rates. Different than, let's say, the songwriter side, where there's an opportunity for you to go to BMI, there's an opportunity for you to go to ASCAP, and there's an opportunity for you to go to CSAC. Okay, so where there may even be a particular artist or two that like Stevie Nicks writes for BMI, she may write for this or that and the other stuff. That you have a choice, that you have a fair level playing field. You can decide whether or not you want to take advantage of playing CSAC artists or not, and such. But here, for the most part, unless you strike a deal with the song label or the artist, as it were, to be able to play that song with we strike a deal as together, then you basically have to go through Sound Exchange. You pay them, they pay you.
So is it true that if you're on an analog signal and it goes over to digital, that you're going to get a lot more stations out of it? You can have 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, well, one of the benefits to traditional radio stations going over to the digital realm, not only is it quality, on the AM side, it's definitely going to be quality. Any of you listen to AM radio now, most of you probably don't, because it's just one of those mediums. But it's going through its phase. Basically, it's mostly talk. There's not much music on the AM anymore. It's very low fidelity. It's prone to static, even on good days. In the digital realm of things, it very much sounds like FM broadcast stereo now. Okay, and the FM will broadcast in clear digital CD quality. On the FM side, because the quality will be so high, they have an opportunity to actually split that digital signal in multiple different ways. So they may be able to have multiple channels on that one frequency. WRNO Classic Rock, WRNO Deep Classic Rock 2, WRNO Unknown Classic Rock 3, and as such. So another thing, in a marketing standpoint for traditional radio stations, is now that if each one of those 50 radio stations on the FM side in a market has 2, 3 stations, your market now has 150 FM stations. Well, now you're competing with satellite radio where they have 100. I mean, they're sort of limited to their capacity. So it puts, one of the reasons why traditional radio stations push the FCC and the industry and the the radio manufacturers to move this thing as forward as they can is because they feel that they're lacking in moving technology. I mean, they're still playing, you go in your car and you're listening to a, broadcast wireless signal that was created 70 years ago. You just can't compete in today's marketplace with that. And even more so, it's becoming more difficult when you'll be able to get 6,000 stations in your dashboard.
Companies brand football stadiums, so they're going to brand radio stations in the same way. They're going to be a UPS radio station.
Well, there has been actually some instances of that. We were talking, a perfect example, and this has happened in a couple of markets, but yeah, I mean, there's obviously different opportunities in doing that. To try to get away, one of the drawbacks of radio stations are today, especially the satellite radio, internet radio at the same time, is that traditional radio stations are becoming so cluttered with commercials. I mean, on average, they play maybe up to like 15 minutes of an entire hour worth of commercials. Not all at once, but it certainly can be seen that way sometimes. A couple of companies, one, being Clear Channel, is they've actually licensed the rights to their newsroom to a particular bank. So yeah, I mean, you may see more of that come on board. More of the subliminal advertising, not just 30-second spots, flash commercials, which basically means instead of a 30 or 60-second commercial for your car dealership, you're basically giving a 1 to 5-second commercial.
So this creates all kinds of new opportunities for people and for jobs and for technology applications.
It does, and it's not necessarily in the terrestrial, while I was in college, and the whole idea is, go out, you get a job in radio, you work at radio, and you do that.
Right.
It's just not the case today. I mean, there's many opportunities, and technology brings far-fetched opportunities that we may not even see today, in that regards. Whether it be content, like I said, basically the idea is that these stations that are out there, they need content, create content, do something along that nature. So the opportunities are going to be great based on what's going to come to play.
So new content has to be created to make it useful in the digital domain.
Well, I mean, the thing is that you have, if you have 6,000 radio stations and like that,
got to put something.
where are you going to put them? All dial tone just doesn't work. I mean, it's just only gets you so far. I mean, the content, theoretically, no matter what it is, no matter whether it's 60,000 radio stations or one particular station or something like that, it always says that content is king. I mean, if you create it, they will come.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is that, like a perfect example is that, in the 70s and the like, when you wanted to watch television stations, you basically had three choices. You had 3 network stations in your market. So either ABC, NBC, or CBS. That's it. That's all you had. They created the content, or they actually bought the content, distributed it. Those were your choices. Cable has brought, even more so 20, 30 years after cable was, in most homes, has bought, 100, 500 stations in there. Well, yeah, there's a lot of recycled content, but there's a lot of content that wouldn't be thought of 20, 30 years ago. I mean, some of those things. But at the same time, it had to be known that, the traditional broadcast stations are still around. They're still around. They haven't necessarily died. They've had to share their audience with 500 different stations. But what it's actually made them do, in a way, in some regards, is actually create better content. It makes us all better in content creation because you raise the bar. Because absolutely you raise the competition. Because, if there's only 3 radio stations, they're going to listen to you, they're going to listen to the guy next door, they're going to listen to the guy after that. That's it. You've got 3 choices. If you've got 6,000 choices, if you're not good, you're not going to get an audience. I mean, you really have to bring the content there. So that has an awful lot to do with it. In a way, these guys would love to go back to just having 3 stations and then worrying about the guy next door and that's it. But the fact of the matter is, in order for them to compete in the marketplace today, they really have to bring to the table great content.
Let's talk a minute about one of the reasons you're here today is to meet with some of the people on campus about creating opportunities for the students and also for the university and the community. Could you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we were just, talking about content and the like, and it's imperative that, that we reach out and develop and create new content. And that doesn't necessarily come easy. But one of the features would be to help, incubate and develop particular content now that we come about. And I think those are the great opportunities in a forum that is an educational experience, but at the same time can help develop and create new content in ways traditional radio stations couldn't even fathom.
Now, there's going to be a lot of new equipment involved in this game, right? I mean, you have to have new, different equipment than you currently have.
Well, yeah, I mean, traditional broadcasters, both on the television and the radio side, are dealing with that today. I mean, most of their equipment on the AM side is pretty much mono. It's not necessarily stereo. And the FM side, it's pretty much analog based. It's not necessarily digital based. Some of them are still playing off tapes. Some of them might be playing off digital content now and the like. But the board, everything else, all the equipment, maybe in a set that all has to be new. It's going back as far as even the transmitter. I mean, all of that stuff has to come at a price. So basically, the whole idea is that, on the television side of things, they basically had to buy basically every new set of equipment on down to a separate transmitter. On the FM side, they've done it slightly different. The fact that you can buy a transmitter that's a hybrid, so to speak, that continues to broadcast on the analog side, and at the same time provides a digital signal. Because there for a while, stations will broadcast on the same frequency they currently broadcast on the analog side. The signal will be split, analog to digital, and then once the transfer is over, years down the line, whether it's 2010, 2015, they'll turn off the analog signal, and that'll provide them with more bandwidth. So theoretically, right now, where they may be able to, on the FM side, have 3 digital channels and 1 analog channel, all on the same frequency, all going at the same time. When they turn the analog signal off, they may be able to go to 6, because they'll have that much more bandwidth at their disposal. But the benefit to them is that they don't have to have duplicate transmitters. They can rev up their equipment. Because, for some of these stations, it's a huge expense to build off that. But it is true that, more so than ever, the whole technology is going to change in the distribution of how the content is created in a digital form and distributed, how it's broadcast.
Isn't it true? I think John could tell us this. I think we're actually webcasting this as a radio show on our website, Loyola.la. That's right.
Not this week.
Next week.
Starting next week.
Well, that's pretty cool, though. You go to Loyola.la and hear our full speakers on the internet radio.
Yeah, I think the thing is that, that's the opportunities that, we were talking about, the content and stuff like that you wouldn't be able to do in a university forum. If you had, having a radio station, yeah, but you really only have one signal to do that, and you're balancing time between that. But what the internet brings is an opportunity for you to create content, bring your own channel to the market. I mean, if this department wants one particular channel, the law department has a whole separate channel, and the like. I mean, I think that, that provides an opportunity. And who's to say that, that there's an opportunity for, other departments, other entities. Just like our clients, whether they're, radio stations, they play music, and whether they do, hip-hop or R&B, or whether they do webcast or talk, or one of the stations we have is chess.fm, that it's like listening to paint dry, I think. But they broadcast chess games 24 hours a day. All chess, all day. And one of my colleagues says, it is sort of, I listened to it for a little while, but you know what? These chess fans are just phenomenal. And that's basically it. They have a chess game going on there somewhere in the world 24/7.
That's amazing.
That's what the internet brings. Now, you would never get Clear Channel to put one of their radio stations on the FM doing all chess.
That might be the color guy for the chess match.
That's what they do. I mean, they have color and commentator. And they sit there, and it's just like, it is true. I mean, I'm not necessarily a chess player, but it's sort of like. But you know what? They have an audience. They have a worldwide audience, and they have content, and it's unique, and it's something that you find nowhere else.
Well, I just want to say one thing about what George and Ann and I and Mark have been talking about today and yesterday. That there's the communications department is on the 4th floor of the music building, music communications building. And there's some space up there, and George is, we're talking about trying to make a deal with them so that he rents the space as a business, brings his company to that space. And then all the manufacturers of HD radio equipment stock that space with all the used equipment. And then so people can come in and try it out and test it. And then you and the students in communications could be creators of content for all these HD radio stations that are going to come online. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it provides a great opportunity in both helping to develop and incubate content, and at the same time provide a resource to provide some great opportunity for a learning curve on a lot of these, great equipment that is coming into play in the digital realm of things.
So you could be completely up to date on the new equipment. You could also be creating programming. You could also be hanging out with people who own radio stations who are trying to transfer over and probably offer placement opportunities and intern opportunities. All this is true, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like all good. So maybe we can bring that about. But that's definitely something we're looking into.
Oh, I had the volume down.
So that's the internet radio station.
Internet radio station.
Cool.
Of course, the speakers are all that great. but it has, it has a pair of headphones, and this is better quality than analog radio. This is better quality than satellite radio.
Oh.
And the station's out of Seattle, and it's crystal clear. This is live off the internet, even with the bad cell signal.
That's amazing.
Does anyone have an FM radio that wants to do the same thing here? No, so it's not that far off before this is where your 6,000 stations are going to be.
And there could be any sliver of any market. I mean, it's limited.
It's up to your imagination. I mean, the content's up to your imagination. Like I said, whether it's chess, whether it's webmaster radio, whether it's selling real estate, I mean, the opportunities are endless. And if you can build content and create an audience for that, I mean, that is, getting your foot in the door.
So you could do educational things. You could do cloud. You could do music theory. You could do.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like I said, anything like that is up to your imagination.
That's exciting.
In the 60s and 70s, we're talking about FM radio being 70 years old, but really for the most part, the commercial aspect of FM broadcasting really didn't take hold till the 70s, late 70s, early 80s. I mean, the idea that, we can go back to like in the mid-60s, a colleague of mine worked at a radio station where the owner was given an FM license and passed on it for free. Because she felt that at the time, AM radio was going to be the only medium to distribute music. That station continues to be #1 and is making millions of dollars. Of course, she sold out of the business completely. I don't know why. She maybe made the wrong decision back then. But the thing is, in the 60s, the FM radio stations were just carriers of nothing, whether it was dead air, whether it was actually put a needle on a groove and just let the song track. Because there weren't that many radios out there. There weren't that many listeners. And there was no content. It was either beautiful music with a bunch of tapes, or somebody went in there and just plopped down a needle on vinyl and just let it track through the whole thing because it was stereo. It was great. It was high fidelity. Right. And in many ways, in today's internet radio segment, we see the same thing happening with that. These guys are creating a lot of content out there, and it's unique, and it's something that you would not hear on traditional broadcast stations. In some ways, they may or may not be getting a lot of audience. They may be growing, but somewhere down the line, that entity, that brand, that property may be worth something of real value. Just like today, these radio stations, go for $50, $60 million in markets like New Orleans, LA, and stuff like that. Licenses, FCC, FM licenses aren't easy to come by, and they're very expensive. Like I said, 30, 40 years ago, couldn't give them away. So I think the thing is that you do see that in a way, the paradigm and the way that history is repeating itself in a new medium. So,
but I don't listen to radio very often. Is it interactive? I mean, can your station be interactive? You hear from your listeners through email?
Well, yeah, I think the stations that utilize, obviously even traditional radio stations take requests via email. I actually worked at a number of radio stations on the air, and of course we played with the phones, was your sole interaction back then. And nowadays, it might be email, it might be instant message, it might be your source on, MySpace and something like that. And there's multiple ways. Some of the radio stations actually have a camera in the studio. So there's multiple ways off the internet to be interactive with your audience. In addition to some of them, like the Webmaster Radio, they actually take calls. I mean, it's almost funny that it's like going back to the way radio was, but it's like, they take instant message questions, they take email questions, and then they take phone calls as well.
Well, so anybody have any questions of Mr. Bundy about internet radio or radio in general?
Where do you see terrestrial radio going as far as the markets are going? Because you were talking about that chess matches on the internet, and they can operate in niches, but with terrestrial radio, you're just going with one city. What do you think their content's going to be here in the future?
Right. Well, I think the thing is, for local radio stations to succeed, although it's kind of interesting because they're mandated by their FCC license to broadcast in the public interest for the community they're licensed to. I think the thing is that they have to continue to lead to that advantage, because that's the only advantage they have, is actually play to their local audience. They can stream on the internet, many of them do, but the benefits to them in succeeding in their own marketplace is that if they're going to compete with 6,000 radio stations, they have to compete on the advantage they have. And that's the local market. Because, yeah, I mean, you may be able to listen to 6,000 stations in Seattle, and they may play great music and whatnot, but in order for the local station to grab your attention, they have to begin to create content that's compelling to you as a local listener. I mean, that's one thing, like to take television stations, your local television station. It still creates a local newscast. And that's one thing that CNN can't do. They can't create, in 600 markets around the country, create a local newscast. The local station has that advantage. And as long as they continue to take advantage of those opportunities, they will be able to compete, whether it's 500 television stations. It's the same thing for radio stations. I mean, they're seeing from all sides. They're going to have competitors that they don't even know exist. Clear Channel may have a competitor that they just didn't even know existed. So as a result, for them to compete, not only do they have to then move on to the digital realm just to make it sound like it competes in the marketplace, but they also have to create content that's compelling to the local audience. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. They're required to by law, that's great. Some of them do, some of them don't. But you see over time, they're going to be required to do so just based on the economics of it, not necessarily because the Federal Communication says in order to keep your license, you have to play in the public interest. So I think that's where it's going to be.
We were talking earlier about the possibility of creating a network of universities around the country and the world of student bands, student groups, and put that on in their radio station. So they get exposure, it kind of obviates the copyright issues if you get permission, those bands to use your songs. So it could be lots of possibilities here. So I'm spend some time thinking about this.
Because the reality is, it is really up to your imagination how you move forward with a particular project, because it could encompass any aspect of that whatsoever. So.
Right now we have students creating radio shows. They could do a whole station.
Absolutely. I mean, we've created our own content that you can build your own station. And theoretically, where they may be creating content now that's being put on one station, they may actually be able to niche that program. One may be doing jazz, one may be doing classical, and it's all running on the same radio station now. But who's to say that the jazz is now going to be focused on all jazz stations, the classical being on the classical station, and then that builds off that. And then you theoretically have these different versions of the stations, depending on the content.
So then it's going to be a problem of marketing your station, so you can find some listeners.
Well,
and that's where you come.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is that you fragmented, and this is one of the problems that traditional radio stations running into. They see the advantage of breaking their signal up into 3 different stations. They're fearful they're going to water down their brand. classic point. I mean, you know, you have now, you know, one station listening, you know, 50,000 listeners, and then one station, you've broken that up to 20, 20, and 10. You've fragmented your audience, but at the same time, so, you know, there's definitely an opportunity to build off that audience. Because the fact of the matter is that, let's say you have your one station. You have your jazz program, you have your classical program. I'm not saying that somebody's not going to listen to both, but chances are they favor one over the other. Okay? You create a whole different radio station. The jazz is on one station, the classic is on the other. Your jazz listener was over to the jazz station, maybe listen to the classical some station, but the classical listener was listening to the classical station. So then you found your market for that, and you have to build off that, you know, your classic audience is there. And actually you'll create a much more loyal client base of listeners instead of, you know, saying, okay, that I'm really not in the mood for jazz, but that's the program that's up next. You know, so the fact of the matter is that it's a better way to serve your audience by focusing on that brand. You know, you may not think, and this goes back to the programming and radio stations, you know, why every station sounds vanilla. You know, if you listen to an oldie station, if you listen to an adult contemporary station, they never break format. And, you know, even more so now that the idea that, you know, the concept that, you know, Clear Channel is, you know, monopolizing radio stations and making it sound like McDonald's, that every market you go into, every station sounds the same. You've got a Kiss FM here, you've got a mix there, you've got this, that, and the other stuff. But what they tend to find out in surveys is that, you know, a particular flavor of a listener wants to listen to that, and they'll listen longer and they'll listen more often to that particular format over what was maybe a couple of years ago where it's this, that, and the other thing all on one station. So that's kind of how radio became what it is today, which of course now we're all complaining is just bad radio, because it all sounds the same.
We're going to change that.
Very well, but you have an opportunity to do so.
Right.
In multiple ways. The problem is radio stations only have so many signals. So if they fragmented themselves that way, they backed themselves into a corner. Okay, and they had nowhere to go because they couldn't put up other radio stations. And that's not the case in internet.
Amazing new world. This is going to be so cool. So, any other questions? Mike.
What do you think what do you think the effect on artists trying to get airplay and trying to get audiences of radio listeners? What do you think the effect on artists trying to get on the radio will be now that there will be so much more content?
Well, actually, you know, that is a good opportunity actually, because of the fact that, you know, the idea being that, you know, depending on what your artistry is, you can focus on those particular stations. You may get exposed more than you would if there weren't internet stations and there were only 30 or 40 stations in the market. You have more opportunities to get a worldwide audience. And the fact that if you're selling in the digital realm, if you're selling on, you know, whether you're selling on your own website as an artist, your own downloads, or whether you're selling it through iTunes, your audience is right there. And then, you know, the whole idea, before, if you listened to a song on the radio, you had to go down to the record store, you had to go to Tower and buy it, so to speak, and maybe that's why Tower's no longer in business, but the fact is that now, when you hear a song on the internet, you're literally, you know, just clicks away from purchasing and having it on your own. And the exposure to that is tremendous. And I think the opportunities are just basically the channels associated with it are great. I mean, the thing is that they provide plenty of opportunities for an artist.
Yeah.
I mean, more so now, it's a compelling time that you have the resources you may not have had before by focusing on that. So if you have a particular genre that may not fit on, you know, a CBS or Clear Channel property, and it's just not rock and classic, and it just doesn't fit here and there, that you might be able to find and focus on a radio station, or, you know, collaborate with other artists to create your own radio station. I mean, you know, if your genre of music is something that you don't even hear on a radio station, on the internet, let alone over the air, you know, who's to say that you can't, you know, create and develop over that?
So any club could have a radio station.
Absolutely. Absolutely, with the content that they've either created or had, or artists that are coming in. And it's a perfect opportunity for the venue to highlight the artist that's coming in.
Wow, cool. I love this. show George Bundy how much we wanted to do.